Hello, welcome to the Personal Transformation Experience podcast. My name is David Brand.
I'm Maureen Brand.
And we're a married couple, been together about 15 years. We both have master's degree in our respective fields. Mine is in business and
mine is in special education, early childhood development.
And we've been having these great conversations for the last 15 years. We watch a lot of podcasts. We read a lot of books. We follow a lot of prominent people in the areas of neuroscience and parenting and relationships, emotional intelligence, which is something we're going to talk more about today. And we said at one point, why don't we just open this up to more people? Because we felt like this conversation that we've been having has been so beneficial to each other. Maybe others could benefit it too. And here we are. Mm-hmm. So thank you. And this is actually our 4th episode.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to talk about emotionally intelligent communication in relationships. So these could be relationships that you have with a significant other, with your parents, with other members of your family, with your children, coworkers, if you're a leader, with your subordinates, your boss. It's very important. And I think I just finished reading this excellent book called Permission to Feel by Marc Brackett, and you've got the deets on who Marc Brackett is.
Yeah, so Marc Brackett is the director at Yale University, the director of emotional intelligence. He wrote the book, obviously, you just said that. But yeah, he's, let me find his information here. So yeah, he is the director at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and he has a website, and he's done an enormous amount of work in the field of emotional intelligence by bringing to the forefront, people not being afraid of their emotions and understanding their emotions and separating out their emotions. And he talks a lot about bringing his program into schools, into the workplace. So he's doing a lot of really great work. We're going to have some information on his organizations in our show notes, but I really think that what he's doing is tremendous. He's got his program in like over 5,000 schools right now.
Yeah, so I know you introduced me to the podcast about a month ago. Well, let's narrow that down a little bit. He was featured on Andrew Huberman's podcast.
Correct, yeah.
And I always forget the name of Huberman's podcast.
Huberman Lab. Yeah.
Oh, that should have been an easy
Huberman
one.
Lab, yeah. It's
low-hanging fruit
program,
there.
Right.
So Marc Brackett was a guest on the Huberman Lab, and they were talking about emotional intelligence, and it was fascinating.
Right.
It was a little over 2 hours long, but that's how I was introduced to Marc Brackett. And after I finished watching the podcast, I said, I have to go and get this book, Permission to Feel, which I basically read in 2 days. Now, I didn't rush through it. I gave it, but I spent a lot of time reading it. I don't want people to think I speed read through things, because I don't. I read books in chunks. I'll take entire chunks of days to read books so I can read them and grasp the concepts. But and we'll get into this a little bit more. But I had an epiphany in reading the book and recognizing something. And I think what's really worked well in our relationship is we hold mirrors up to each other so we can kind of see what others see. Well, this book for me was like holding a mirror up to my own behavior in a way that I had never done before. So I'm really excited about today's podcast and to talk more about it. So I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about first was the different ways that we can respond to other people's feelings. Because there's one piece is recognizing our own feelings. The other piece to this is recognizing and responding to other people's feelings. And that's where I realized I've been tripping myself up, for lack of a better expression. And I think we can all agree one of the ways we can respond to other people's feelings is by ignoring them. And maybe not willfully, it could be willfully, but it could be ignorance. And that was the epiphany I had in reading this book, is that I didn't always recognize the feelings of others because I didn't have the tools to do so. Not because I didn't care, because I care deeply, but I didn't know how to recognize what I was seeing, and I didn't know how to respond to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you're talking in the context of relationships, like as a parent, so a lot of times parents will, their child is like having not a full on meltdown, but whiny or, upset. And so the parents, I've seen, I know we did it, you try to ignore it, and, don't feed into it. Go have them deal with it. They need to learn to deal with it on their own. That is kind of the general consensus, a lot of parents and adults too. Like if someone has a behavior or an emotion rather that you don't quite know how to deal with, you ignore it. Or you just dismiss it, or you try to fix it, right?
Yeah, well, that's a different approach as we're going to talk about. Suppression, right? We could tell people suppress their feelings too.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, suppressing the feelings. So I think what I was gonna go on to say is that when we do things like ignore or dismiss or try to fix, nothing. The feelings are not being processed, right? So you have a child who's having a hard time, who's emotionally upset about something. They didn't get on the soccer team, or their friends were mean to them, or they couldn't get the toy that they wanted, or whatever it is, and their child's having a really hard time. I mean, for a small child, that's a big deal. They're having these really big emotions. And so I think emotional intelligence, when you think in terms of that, you're thinking that you want to do a few things, and dismissing them or ignoring them is not in that ballpark. He talks about like recognizing, validating, understanding, labeling your emotions. And now this is all from, I had said before, the Ruler program that he's devised for the schools. It's called Ruler, and you recognize the emotion, you understand the emotion, you're labeling it, you're expressing it, and on a regular basis, right? Regularity with all of these strategies. So I think when you're dealing with a child or an adult, your partner, a sibling, even a coworker, I think it's important to recognize that someone is having some strong emotions, validating those emotions, and get them to tell you more if it's an appropriate relationship to do that.
So before we get into the strategies, though, I still think it's important to kind of work through what the different responses actually look like, because I don't think, for me, it was very important to process this and say, what does it look like to respond in different ways? I think ignoring makes kind of sense, right? You see your partner is maybe looks like they're about to cry, or they're sitting on the couch by themselves staring at the ceiling, and you just walk by and say, I'm going to the store, is there anything you want me to pick up? And you just walk out the door, right? And don't sit down and go, hey, you look a little off, right? Or there's something going on, right? So I think that ignoring, right, could be just complete lack of awareness. I kind of call this like emotional blindness, right? You're blind to the emotional expressions of others. I think the other one, and we can relate to this as children. So you have more on that?
Yeah, I just when you said ignoring it or having ignorance about it, those are two very different things. Like, I mean, if you don't recognize someone's upset, that's one thing. But if you do recognize it and you're ignoring them, that's a whole nother thing.
Right.
So that means that either you don't want to deal with it or you can't deal with it, right? You just one or two things, right? You just don't want to, or you think you shouldn't deal with it.
Right.
You let them deal with it on their own. But if you don't recognize it, that's a completely different animal, so to speak.
Right. And I think for me, I've definitely had difficulties with recognizing it.
Yeah.
I think the other one you mentioned is being dismissive, right? Yeah. So things like boys don't cry, you're being dramatic.
Oh yeah,
you're a drama queen.
Yeah, I'm a drama. I got a lot. Yeah, I got that a lot because I was very emotional. I was one of those very sensitive people, highly sensitive, and I always got, oh, you're so dramatic, and your emotions on your sleeve, or whatever the expression is. Like,
So when you dismiss someone's emotions, especially a child, what does that lead them to do with those emotions?
well, I would assume that I'm going to guess that they suppress those emotions.
Yeah, no, 100%.
They can't process them. And for a child, it's all about them,
Right?
So they're egocentric, and so everything's their fault. So they're going to assume that it's their fault, and they don't know what to do with these emotions. And I'm not going to, they don't love me because I have these emotions, so I can't have them in order to get what I want from them.
And I think back to being disciplined, whether it was physical punishment or some other type of punishment for something I did as a young child, maybe 10, 11 years old, and being told I need to take it like a man, right? Whatever that means.
That's awful.
Because men don't have emotions, I guess.
Right.
But then later, I believe that I internalized that to mean I can't show vulnerability. I can't go into the workplace and show vulnerability, right? I can't show that I'm not okay, right? So then it teaches you to feel it's not okay to not be okay, which is the opposite of what we usually say now, that it's okay to not be okay. And I know I was certainly taught that. And then, even my mother had all kinds of issues, was very emotional most of the time, a lot of issues going on in her life, and was always talking to me about her issues. And so I learned from my mother that her emotional needs came before mine. And I think I learned from my father to some extent to kind of push those feelings down and don't, be strong, be a man, not wear those things out in your sleeve like you said.
Yeah, and this ties into actually our first podcast. We talked about how when these things happen to you as a child, how you manifest sort of maladaptive behaviors, strategies, coping skills, whatever it may be, as an adult. And it kind of, we're going to talk about changing the way you think about things and your perception, which is very different when you come from that place where you have all these suppressed emotions. And so when someone gives you feedback, or you have people treating you a certain way, you perceiving it in a way that is from the lens of your personal experience with emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. One of the other responses to feelings, right, especially with kids, is to try and fix, right? Jump into fix mode, problem solver, right? Oh, I'm sorry that you didn't make the baseball team. Let's go shopping. That'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
Right? Or don't be so hard on yourself. Lots of kids didn't get 100 on the test.
Right.
So then you try and rationalize away somebody's feelings.
And nothing against retail therapy. I'm all for it. However.
But I think those examples are probably easier to come to, which I think then teaches people to kind of mask over the pain or the feelings. Okay, so what you're saying is I need to, instead of feeling, I need to replace it with something else.
Or run away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Avoidance, right?
Avoid
avoidance,
the feeling. You're avoiding it. And, I just had a thought, in an adult relationship, a lot of times when you're with somebody that you care about, I know that I've heard this from other people, like, how does he not know that I'm upset? How could she not know that, that was a bad thing to do, or that was a bad idea? How could she think that was something that she, if she says to me, I'm not going to be upset, how could she not think I'm going to be upset? And I think, in adult relationship, that happens a lot. You expect your partner to kind of read your mind.
Well, I get that at work too. People are like, how did you not know that what you said upset somebody? We're going to really talk more about I definitely want to talk more about that.
That's a big one, because that's,
it definitely is, because I have a lot of examples on that. But I think also, along with the problem solving, fixing and problem solving kind of go hand in hand, but there's also this piece of, instead of validating somebody's feelings, which we definitely want to talk more about, is saying, what can we do so you don't feel that way? Oh, you feel sad? What can we do so you don't feel that way?
Cheer you up, yeah.
Right?
What cheer you up?
Which implies that it's not good to feel, right?
Right. And I think,
I don't want to see you sad. Or worse, as a parent, right? Say, it breaks my heart to see you sad.
Yeah, now you're guilty about it. Now you feel guilty for it.
Right.
And that's,
or mommy doesn't want to see you sad.
That's like
Ooh.
so if you think about all those things that people say, we want to truly give people permission to feel. Like, I love that
Right.
Marc Brackett calls his book Permission to Feel, because you really, it's so important to have that permission to be like, it's okay to feel angry or sad or frustrated or pissed off.
Right.
Or
Dr. Becky talked about that
Yeah.
too in Good Inside, right? There's two things can be true. I'm still going to not allow you to do this thing you want to do as a parent.
Right.
But it's okay. You can be angry about it.
You can be angry about it, and the parent, I'm sure, feels some kind of way about doing, but boundaries are critical for little kids, and it's important to hold those boundaries with love and compassion. And I think and you could do it, but that's something that's you could take through all of life, into adulthood, into all of your relationships, holding your own boundaries with love and compassion, and being like, look, I'm not okay with this. I love you, and but this is not okay for me, and here's why.
Right. Well, we have to do that at work too.
Yeah.
I've had to tell people that I was letting go of separating them from their employment, that I understand this is hard for you, and I understand you're upset about losing your job,
a tough thing
but
to do. Yeah.
my job is to protect this company, and you've done things that put the safety of this company at risk more than once, despite being warned and being told and being given the opportunity to correct the behavior, so we can no longer keep you here because your risk to the company is too great. While that is very upsetting for you, we still have to do this, right? So, you can apply that in all walks. But I think kind of going back to, I know we're drifting into strategy, but they're all, it is kind of cool, right? To be able to say, okay, hey, if this, but how do we do it differently? That's cool. I think the other thing I wanted to make sure we talked about was outsourcing. I know Marc talked about in the podcast, outsourcing our children's needs. This is more for parenting, right?
More for parenting, yeah.
And saying, oh, you feel sad? Let me call the doctor and see if they can give you a prescription for that.
Yeah.
Or let's get you into a therapist. Now, that probably is a good idea anyway, depending on the situation, the severity of the sadness or the feelings. But it shouldn't be the first line of defense. So we're not saying any of these things like that's bad. That shouldn't be your first line of defense. Talk to your child. Right.
So it's so interesting because I'm just going to give a little snippet of his podcast. So he talks about Marc Brackett. He talks about his Uncle Marvin. And I love this story because he has an Uncle Marvin who, so Marc as a child was bullied by his, people in school, teachers, his parents were, by his own admission, they were abusive and they bullied him. And his father at one point said to him, you're the kind of kid I would have beaten up when.
Yeah, it sounded like his father was trying to toughen him up.
Yeah, trying to toughen him up. I'm sure that they both loved him in their own way, but they really had no idea, how to support him emotionally with what he was going through. So he did have an Uncle Marvin who was at the house, who was very perceptive, and gave him the emotional support that he needed, which was, to recognize that he was, in fact, having a hard time. He wasn't happy. And he sat down and talked to him about it, and he supported him, and he was there for him. So I think, every child needs to have an Uncle Marvin, but, it doesn't have to be an uncle, right? It can very well be mom and dad or whoever your caregivers are. So I think that's really important to remember that, I do the same thing. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to handle this with my child, so I need a good therapist for them, or, but I think it's important that we as parents or whatever relationships we're in to understand ourselves and our emotions and gain some emotional intelligence, like learn and figure out how to handle our own emotions so that we then can accept and cope with someone else's emotions, because we're human beings and that's how we roll, right? We're all about emotions. we're born just a big bundle of desire and emotions, right? So it's so important to learn the strategies and understand what emotional intelligence is and how you can help yourself and others.
Yeah, so there's a lot here to the practical application.
Yeah.
I think where the epiphany was for me, we moved here from New York to South Carolina 6 years ago. And at the time, my oldest, who was 15, went through the move, and they were very upset. They were in the room crying for at least for a few months. And then a year after we moved here, they started self-isolating, shutting the door, leading to that day in August of 2019 when they said they couldn't even get out of bed to go to school.
Yeah.
And that's when I called the doctor. But at no time did I ever say to my child, I see that you're sad.
Yeah.
And this must be really hard for you. This move that we just did must be really hard for you. You must miss your mom an awful lot, right? Tell me more. Right. I don't want to put words into their head either, but this is not a child who talks easily, so it might have been beneficial to get a little conversation starter going and guess, right? And knowing them, they could have turned around and said, no, that's not it at all, and then told me the truth. Because that does happen sometimes. Like if I prod and they're like, no, you got it wrong. Here's what's really wrong. I'm like, okay. So in a roundabout way, I get those feelings out, right? But I didn't ask the question, right? My immediate thought at the time was, let's get you set up with a therapist. And then that day they couldn't get out of bed, I called the doctor to try and get them on medication. But I never really sat down. I was at work. I didn't even come home from work.
What did I do? I mean,
my work was more important.
I called you up and I said, I just feel like he just doesn't want to go to school.
Right.
Well, he absolutely didn't want to go to school. And it wasn't just because he just didn't want to go to school. He couldn't get out of bed. But I didn't have the wherewithal or the emotional intelligence at that time to think, wow, this kid's in trouble. He's in trouble emotionally. He's having a really bad time. He doesn't want to go to school. There's a reason he didn't want to go to school.
Right. But I missed the opportunity.
So did I. Yeah.
And the other thing is, led to me telling you Friday night that I felt really sad about this. Yeah. And I wasn't sad. I'm not happy that my child didn't get what they needed from me. I'm more sad about the fact that it was because I didn't have the tools.
Right.
So I kind of, in a way, have a disability around emotional intelligence that unfortunately, because my role as a parent is so critical, my role as a leader of other people is so critical, it is the biggest blind spot that I have right now in my life, I feel. But I have never been so acutely aware of it as I am now. That I was able to make that connection and go, I guess we all have those visions of the scientist in the lab who's working on something, and all of a sudden they go, Eureka, I've got the formula, right? Well, that's how I felt Friday night.
Here's what I did. He tells me this, you tell me this, and what do I say? I quickly defend your position. Because I remember when we were going through this, both of our children were having a really hard time. And we were doing everything we could with what we knew, with the tools that we had. We were trying to figure out how to get him help any way we could. We were trying to understand the situation. We were consulting with doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and they were guiding us in the wrong direction. I
think they
did not.
I personally, I try not to say wrong or bad, but I think they didn't have the tools either.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sorry. They didn't seem to have the tools. They didn't have the ability to explain to us about emotional intelligence. And even though I understand things like theory of mind and taking perspective and, your perception about things, I didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't actually have the tools to provide him with, recognizing what was going on, understanding, offering compassion, validating, and getting him the help that he needed. I mean, we were working really hard to get him the help that he needed, but we did not have the tools. So, and I came to your defense, and I said, because from from an internal family systems perspective, thank you, Dick Schwartz, one of my parts flared up and said, wait a minute, you don't get to beat yourself up. We worked really hard. We worked together and we did it the best we could from what we know. So no, don't beat yourself up. But all he really needed was for me to validate that he just felt sad, and he's allowed to feel sad because he wasn't able to give his child what he needed at the time because he didn't know. But he could still be sad about that. And that's really what he needed at the time. And I didn't provide it because from my own perception, my own, like where I was coming from, my part showed up and said, oh, no, you don't get to beat yourself up. We worked really hard. So that's really interesting that happened. And that's real. I mean, that's exactly, and when he said to me, well, you should tell me, I really could just use you, what did you say? I don't remember exactly what you said, but I think you said something like, well, you should just tell me, can't I just be sad? Like, can't you just validate that I'm sad? And again, my part was like, oh, now you're going to tell me how to talk? So it's,
something along those lines.
There's your mirror, but there is your mirror there. And I just needed time to step back, and I was listening to a quick podcast again by Marc Brackett, because I'm really fascinated by his work, and I think he has such a powerful and valuable messages. And it talked about reflecting and changing the story, or what was it that reframing. So I had to reframe that whole scenario and realize that I didn't have the emotional intelligence in the moment, because one of my parts showed up and said, no, and decided to defend. And so that's also, ties into emotional intelligence. I think IFS and emotional intelligence could make a really great couple, because there's a lot to understanding. In order to have and recognize that your part is showing up and doing what they're doing is emotional intelligence, I think. So.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. So not only is it important that we validate the feelings of others, but make sure they understand they're allowed to have those feelings, right? Mm-hmm. Even the point where you're being told you no longer have this job and you're at the table crying, it's like, it's natural to feel this way, right?
I did not give you permission to feel.
That is true.
Yeah, I did not want to give him permission to feel. I wanted him to feel like, because to me he was beating himself up, and no, he just was sad about what happened. He totally wasn't, and I perceived it completely not what his message was meant to say. Like, that wasn't your message.
So I realized that I often miss cues, right? Cues that somebody's feeling a certain way. But even I was telling the story at work about how somebody brought up Dolly Parton, and I was talking about Krispy Kreme Dolly Parton donuts, and people told me, don't show us that. And I did anyway, because I thought it was funny to keep going. But really, reading the room properly and being emotionally intelligent would tell me, enough's enough. The group doesn't want to hear it, and move on, right? And sometimes, I don't know when to move on. And I feel all these other things too. I feel that there were times when my daughter danced. I never told her after the dance how proud I think I've told her I was proud, but I don't think in those moments specifically. I said, watching you tonight, it was so emotional. You were so beautiful. I was so proud of you, right? I don't think I've ever expressed that. Mm-hmm. And I felt it. So it's not that I don't have the capacity to feel those things, right? I felt deeply for my child, who at 15 was going through those things, but I didn't. Yeah. I wasn't moved to make those comments.
Why do you think you weren't able to compliment her on her dancing?
I can only surmise that it has something to do with the fact that I was never complimented for anything growing up as a child. The very religious household that I lived with my father, it was more important that we did things that make God look good, and we don't do anything to make ourselves look good. So if I don't make God look good, then nothing's worth doing. And so I was always like last. So we never celebrated achievement. I wasn't even allowed to go to my high school graduation. I didn't walk across the stage with my class. I was the only child out of hundreds that did not walk across the stage and get a diploma, because I was told that was celebrating the self-achievement, self-accomplishment. We don't do that. So it's really it's hard. Do you think it's something else? You've known me 15 years. I almost feel like you have another thought.
No, I don't think, I mean, because I've known you for a long time, and I know your childhood. I read your book. And so I think that you just you simply were never taught. You didn't have the framework.
Yeah.
And you were never taught there was no model for that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lack of capacity to do it.
It's absolutely.
I think it's a lot. I just never had this behavior modeled that you celebrate other people's achievement, you celebrate success, you tell people how, I am becoming better at it, but I have to really work at it. Where some people, because it's all they live and breathe, all they've known, all they've seen. Yeah. Like I have a coworker who I gave a lot of positive praise to the other day, because I think I brought this up in the last podcast, so forgive me if you heard this before, but just the fact that they brought their 10-year-old to an adult event, right, to show them how to interact with other people, how to have conversation with other people, how to show interest in other people. It goes back to the old Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I have read over and over again. I have to just keep reading it, because every time I read it, it still stands out to me that how important it is to really make other people feel good, and not necessarily to make a sale, but the whole world opens up to you when you are a catalyst toward making people feel better about themselves.
Yeah, but I hear you saying that you read it over and over again, and you still didn't get it.
No, I didn't say I didn't get it. I get a little bit further each time.
Right, but there's a foundation piece missing. So here you are putting all this, like, building this building, and like you have 3 stories missing here, but you have all this other stuff up here. So the stories that are missing are the levels of emotional intelligence that you haven't gained or learned, because, I mean, again, I don't want to jump to your defense, right? I'm not defending you. You could feel the way you need to feel about it, but I still think that, Dale Carnegie's going to make a whole lot of sense once you really get a handle on understanding emotional intelligence in a very concrete, sort of granular way. And that's what his program is all about. And I can't stress more marcbrackett.com. He's got several programs, the one for the school, the ruler program for school, and OGI or something like that for adults. And he has a corporate program that he goes in and he trains corporate executives. So he's doing a phenomenal job in his field.
So yeah, and what there's so much of this is lumped together. One is not always recognizing what to do in the moment, what to say to somebody in the moment, or the right thing to say, right? Right, because somebody is mad, you don't start laughing, right? I've done that to you, right? So that's like, it's not an appropriate emotional response. And, sometimes I'm acutely aware of it. We had a employee on my team whose grandmother had passed away, and they were very sad, and we were talking in the cubicle. Another leader walked up. She didn't say anything. She's very good at just being like somewhat flat until she reads the room. Love that about her. Another leader came up kind of bubbly and just kind of like, hey, what's going on? Like we were all having a good time. And I'm like, her grandmother just passed away, because I felt like I had to make sure the other person could make that transition, because they didn't really realize. And then they probably would have realized on their own, because they do have very high emotional intelligence. Yeah. But I just felt like in that moment, like just to quickly let her know that we were having this conversation so she wasn't caught off guard. And maybe I didn't need to do that, But
that was very insightful of you to kind of be that honed in on the fact that this person came over in a certain way, right? And then you can
Right,
talk
I did read
about
that cue.
the quadrants.
I
right?
did read it. Yeah.
So she was, I don't know what quadrant she was in. So Marc Brackett also
She was
has
probably
this
in the
tool.
yellow quadrant. Yeah.
He has
Yeah.
a tool. What is it called?
So the mood meter. We'll
The
share
mood
that
meter,
out on
right.
our website.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the Instagram page and the website.
But it's good to refer to it because it really does help kind of put things in perspective, and so you understand in that moment. These are emotions on purpose now, right? So she's upset. You understand she's upset, so you're not going to be all bubbly. Your quadrant is not going to be, in the blue or whatever it is. It's going to be appropriate for the context in which you're in within the relationships that you're around. So you were at work and it was a colleague, and the other one came over all bubbly, and it wouldn't have been appropriate. And it's good that you gave her a heads up, because then she would have not realized it soon enough, and then felt embarrassed or whatever, but that's those are good instincts. And there's he talks about having emotions on purpose and understanding what you're going to go into a situation and how you should feel, and so you can control that, right? So if you're going to, like he talks about, going in and doing a talk for to get funding, where does he want to be? How does he want to approach it? Where is his emotions going to be? And so you can choose in that moment what quadrant you want to be in, and take it from there. And I love that idea. I never thought about, it's just not something that's so intuitive. Emotions on purpose, right? You feel what you feel. Sometimes you can't control them, but many times you can control them in a very contextual way. So I love that about his approach.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence covers so many things. So it's not just perception of somebody's feelings, but also recognizing, picking up on social cues too, right? Mm-hmm. And I definitely have a habit of, every time somebody talks about something, is connecting it to my own personal experience. I
yes.
have said this as a matter of pride, that in every conversation I'm in, somebody can talk about a place and I have a story for it. But people don't always want to hear my story.
No.
And that's one of the things in the Dale Carnegie book. It's about show interest in the other person.
Yeah.
Let the other person show interest in you.
Right.
But don't force interest in you down their throat, right? So you don't always know, right, how the other person's going to be. So you can never go wrong if you go up to somebody, how are you feeling? I understand there's been a lot of changes in the company, right? Like if I'm talking to somebody on my team, there's been a lot of changes. How do you feel about them? How do you feel about the change in leadership? Right? Very specific, open language. And just let people talk.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not really liking it. Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think another thing, it just made me think about silence. Silence is a tough thing to manage and not talk into. Silence is important, and I find it uncomfortable. I'm getting better with it.
Right.
But I don't like when I'm having a conversation or I'm in a group, there's all of a sudden silence. I feel like it's my responsibility to fill it in. Yeah,
I did that with my oldest too. Like all those times we would be in the car together and they were moody, and I would just talk, and finally they would say, "Will you shut up? I'm sick of you. Can't stand you talking anymore," right? Your coworkers don't always do that, but they might want to.
Yeah.
But even an example where I'm asking a person how they feel about change in leadership, then I feel they need to explain it. Oh, well, here's why we did that. But they didn't ask me.
No. Right.
So now if they asked me, it would be different. But the best questions are, right, tell me more.
Right.
Tell me why are you feeling this way about it, right? Do you know? Or what do you need from me? Is there anything I can do in my position to better support you?
Right, because they may already know.
But I don't need to double down on the decision. Like if I made the decision and they don't like it, I don't need to defend it in that moment.
Yeah, and so one of the things it just made me think about a situation where oftentimes, like if I'll go to a doctor or I'm with like another person or a family member is talking to me, and all of a sudden they're telling me all the things that I need to be doing about a specific situation.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
they didn't
ask. First of all, they didn't ask me what I already did.
You didn't ask them.
Right. I didn't ask them for that. I didn't ask them for that feedback, and I've done every single thing that they just spent 5 minutes listing that I should be doing.
Yeah, that's always wonderful too. When
So,
people give you a
and-
list of things to
And
do that you've already done.
so it's really interesting because I'm taking this coaching course, and it speaks directly to that. And it's not that you don't provide the individual feedback, but you find out what it is they do know and what works for them, what they've done that does work, and expand on those skills, building their own capacity to it. This is for, I work with babies with disabilities. So this is, I'm working with a family, and my job is as the coach, or, to help that family help their children meet their milestones. The children are typically delayed in some way or another, developmentally delayed. So I need, rather than go in and say, oh, you could do this, this, and this, I don't know what the parents have tried. And I'll catch myself, I've done that a few times, provided information, and then the parents will say, well, I've done this, this, and this. And then I kind of was like sheepishly thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Because I don't like it when someone doesn't ask me what I've tried and what's worked, and then just assume I didn't do anything.
Right.
Or is telling me all these things that I already know.
As if you called them asking for
right.
help. Right.
I already know. I have all this information. I already know all these things that they're telling me. So it's really important to ask reflective questions, analytical questions, and allow them to figure, help them facilitate their own problem solving ability to find what works for them, because what might work for me won't work for them. They don't feel comfortable doing it, and so forth. So that's a really important thing to remember.
So that's really interesting, because you talked a lot about what you needed from the other people in that moment. But what is a way that you could help that other person, right, who was giving you all this advice? What is an emotionally intelligent response in that moment to them? Right? So you're a little frustrated. They're giving you advice you didn't ask for. What do you? Because I've got an idea in my own head. I was just wondering what you think. Like, what is the emotionally intelligent way to respond to that?
I mean, I would just, thanks. I don't know.
I mean, to me, I would say, now I'm thinking about it, because I think that deserves an emotionally intelligent response, right?
It does, yeah. I don't know what I would
say thanks, but no thanks. I already tried all those things. That's not emotionally intelligent, right? But
right.
To say, that's really kind of you to help provide me some of these strategies. And while I have used some of those, I think this has been really helpful. I really appreciate you thinking about me and taking the time to help share these things with me.
Good.
I really appreciate your insight and appreciate your interest in my situation.
So that's definitely taking a different perspective. So So that's turning it all around. Because I mean, honestly, I couldn't have thought of that in this moment. Like, that's not something I would have thought about, because I'm not looking at it from that perspective. So yeah, that's a good way to approach that.
So with about the 15 minutes or so that we have left, can you think of a time recently where I did something that annoyed you?
Yes.
I didn't think it would be very hard. So what comes to mind?
Oh my gosh, something this afternoon.
Wow, that was really recent, but okay.
Yeah, no, we were talking about it. Oh my God, I can't think of it now.
Okay.
Do you remember?
Anything else? I have no idea. I guess my emotional intelligence skills are kind of on the low side if I don't even know what I did. Sometimes I know what I did and I do it anyway. In the moment, I don't mean I do it when I know I shouldn't do it, but I realize it in the moment and then I repair immediately. What I'm trying to do is get to not doing something that's going to upset someone.
You're a nagger. So.
That was yesterday. Yeah.
No, that was this morning.
Oh, it was this morning.
It was this morning.
Oh, about the light.
Yeah. No, so what happens is, and I could handle these things better, and usually about 3 minutes after things like this happen, 3 to 30 minutes, I'll give myself a little more time, I usually think I could have just responded like this. I didn't have to respond that way. I didn't have to get that annoyed. But, so you tend to tell me things like I was just about to get up and turn off a light, but David is very quick to ask people to do things, like always. He doesn't give anybody the opportunity to do it themselves. He's very quick to, can you do me a favor and, get, like, that bothers me. I don't like when somebody's always telling me something to do. Like, if I'm up, can you get to this for me? If you're up, will you get that for me? Like, I don't know why, and it's probably something that happened when I was a child, but man, that pisses me off. Like, it twists my gut, and I have to explore that, because it's definitely, there's no reason for it to, but it irritates the shit out of me. And then, did you turn on the dishwasher? Well, so part of my nighttime routine is to turn the dishwasher on before we go upstairs and go to bed. So I typically do it every night. Either he does it or I do it. But it's such a habit that if you ask me, did I turn the dishwasher on? And then he prefaces it with 100% certainty, did you turn the dishwasher on? No, I can't give you 100% certainty because I don't know. There's 2% of me that thinks maybe I didn't because it's a habit and it's muscle memory, and I don't remember if I actually did it tonight. Maybe I'm thinking of last night. So those are the things that nag me and that irritate me, because but then he'll get up and go down and check it anyway. So one of the things that really bothers me is that you'll ask me to do something and then you'll check anyway and not take my word for it. Whether it be something to look up, whether it be something I was reading, or go down, did you turn the dishwasher on? Yes. Then he'll go and check. Don't ask me if you're going to check. Just check on your own. Like, I don't know why you go through the trouble of asking me and then checking right in front of me. That's, All
right. Well, thank you for telling me how you feel about that.
So, what's a good emotional, intelligent response to that?
For me?
For me. Like, I don't know how I would reframe that. I mean, I know you're not doing it to piss me off. So, can you just give me a chance to do it on my own? And, so if I'm already in bed.
Well, I guess the argument could be just sometimes I need to let things go.
Let things go. Or if I'm already in bed and you see I'm already in bed, so are you, and you want the light off and I forgot, get up and turn it off. Because that's what I would do. I wouldn't, once I got into bed, ask you to do something once, unless you were already getting up. But I wouldn't, that's not something I would do. So there's a real life situation right there.
Okay, fair enough. So, I think with all these things, there are practice, right?
Yeah.
But I think when you talk about being a parent or you talk about leading other people, the stakes are really high with getting this right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I will take that course. And this is something that when the weight of it hit me and I realized what I had missed in seeing in my children, and then I was able to think about situations at work and the things I've missed. I do feel a bit lucky, blessed, whatever it is you want to say, that I am at the level I am as a leader, because that is a privilege to lead other people. And when I think about some of the skills I've been lacking in, it's amazing I've gotten here. And I think, yes, I hear it all the time, well, you're so smart, you have all this intelligence, that's great. And I've worked for people that had extremely high IQ, we assume, right? I mean, that they're very intelligent, but don't know how to get in touch with people, have emotional connections, and very, very poor emotional intelligence. And when I look back on it and I really think about my history, going back to even some of the things I said as a child that were very insensitive to other people, that I've been on the low end of the emotional intelligence scale my whole life. And I know why, right? It's not because I have some, I guess it is a disability in a way, but it's correctable. It's I can learn to shift my behavior. And even though I didn't have this model for me, I see other people at work, right, modeling the behavior appropriately. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important in our relationship too that we challenge each other, just like we did last night. and we challenge each other and call each other out. And that's the benefit of this relationship. That's why we're doing this podcast, because we're sharing with the world kind of how we do it. It doesn't mean it's the right way or the best way, but I think it works because I am leaps and bounds a different person than I was when I met you just over 15 years ago, because you've pushed me and challenged me and introduced me to things that allowed to see myself in a different perspective, to kind of reframe even how I am conducting myself on a daily basis. So for that, I thank you. I love you. I appreciate all that you've done. I do believe, I think that's a quote from a movie, but you make me want to be a better man.
Aww,
so
that's sweet. I love you.
Thank you.
No, well, I mean, I could say the same for sure. I mean, if I haven't evolved, I mean, I certainly have during this relationship, for sure, to be better. And I always seek to be better than I was yesterday. And so, thank you for putting that mirror up to me. It's really important. And I think for everybody listening, it is important to be able to be in a relationship and have that trust. I think it's the trust to know that, you're not doing it for any other reason than you love me, right? I mean, my, parts of me want to believe maybe that's not true, but I know it's true. And so it's important that you be able to have that kind of trust in a relationship, to hold that mirror up to each other and be vulnerable. It's scary, and nobody likes to, your ego steps in and says, oh, no, you don't get to tell me what to do and how to be. But nobody's trying to do that. You were just trying to be better and point something out that's good to learn. So when you take that emotional intelligence test, I would like you to share what you learned.
Oh, I definitely will. I definitely will. And we'll share it with the world too. So good stuff this week. I don't even know what we're going to talk about next week. I don't think we've laid that out yet, unless you have a plan.
Yeah, I don't. I want to, because I have a bunch of ideas that I want to talk about, but we will let you know. I'm going to try to post some stuff on my Instagram site in between to give you a heads up. But thank you for listening, and thank you so much to Marc Brackett, who's doing unbelievable work. I love his stuff. He's got a podcast, he's got a YouTube channel, his book, Permission to Feel, and his ruler program, what he's doing with schools, because I am also a victim of bullying. So it's just so great that he's doing this, and he's on this quest. I love it. So thank you, Marc.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody who has watched this podcast and stuck with us for this hour. We appreciate you. We have immense gratitude to our audience and the people in our lives that are helping us become better people. So with that, we'll sign off, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.